All right, so let's start with the panel. So this panel will have Vinny as the moderator from Supra, and with Vinny joining Patrick again, Vishal, Sherri, and Nick. So Vinny, I guess you can take over from now. As I said already, that this panel is very important, and we try to put it upfront that we want to understand that requirements and demands of on-chain randomness from the other end, like the industry demand perspective. All right, Vinny, over to you. Thanks.
Thank you. Yeah, we're really excited for our panel today. We have an amazing group of panelists, founders, technical engineers from different backgrounds and different use cases in the industry. And I'd like to just start off by allowing each panelist to introduce themselves. Patrick, do you want to start?
Sure, I can kick it off. I'm Patrick McClurg. I'm the CTO at Randamu, a company focused on threshold cryptography in the general sense, but we're also the stewards of the DRAN project, which provides publicly verifiable randomness as a public good. We recently spun out of Protocol Labs, the company behind Filecoin and IPFS, amongst other things. I'll pass it over to Vish.
Hey, thank you so much. So I'm Vish, I'm the co-founder and CEO at LYNK, and we are building modular infrastructure and roll up on top of Move ecosystem. We are like pretty bullish on Move and the on-chain randomness things. And we make blockchain accessible to everyone. So that is what we are like building, and super excited to be here.
I'll go next since I got Vishal as the next one. My name's Sherri Cuono. I'm the CTO and founder of LuckyBit Casinos. We're building the next generation of online gaming for real money to include entertainment and verifiable games within the real money space.
Awesome. And I'll bring up the rear. I'm Nick Kneuper. I go by Kicks on Twitter, and I work with Tiltyard. We build fully on-chain game experiences. So our first one right now is Midnight Heist. And so for us, VRF is essential to us functioning as a game because we need randomness in there to do all sorts of things, like get a random draw of cards or create some sort of randomized outcome. We're also known for building Crypto Raiders, which was an early Web3 game that launched in June of 2021 and is still around today.
And I'm Vinny. I'm VP of Ecosystem at Supra. I lead business development and strategic partnerships. And so Supra went to market originally as an infrastructure provider for Oracle and VRF randomness. We're on 59 mainnets for Oracle data feeds and 23 mainnets for VRF randomness. However, moving forward very soon, we'll be launching our Supra L1 this summer with vertical integration of Oracle VRF, smart contract platform, and also on the roadmap this year, cross-chain automation, cross-chain messaging, and smart contract automation. So essentially, we're bringing together microservices that blockchain applications need to build all together in one place under unified shared security infrastructure. And you can think of it like an iPhone moment for blockchain, which can also enable new use cases. So today's panel is about the demand of randomness in the industry. So we have a great panel of panelists that are actually working on building and working with end users. Needless to say, blockchains and applications built on top of them need randomness, and these can power fair gaming, lotteries, NFT crafting, random sampling, and odds-based use cases. Obviously, gaming is one of the most prevalent applications that need this public randomness on-chain. So just to set the stage, I'd like to hear from the panelists, what's the current state of the user or developer experience within Web3 gaming?
Well, you can actually go.
Okay, sure. I think comparing it to non-Web3 gaming, it's obvious that there's still quite a lot to do. I think some games are well suited to Web3 gaming, and we've seen a proliferation of the types of games that are well suited to it. So I think, for example, casino games, this kind of turn-based games that align nicely with block time, for example, on excellent blockchains, are games that work quite well. We're also seeing a lot of games do parts of the game on-chain and parts off-chain. For example, there's a lot of games where perhaps the in-game currency or the tokens or the points are managed on-chain, but the actual game itself lives off-chain. And there, the UX is quite good. But it's obvious that right now, something like fully on-chain Counter-Strike is not quite there. I don't think there's any chains that support that in any meaningful way. Although we've moved a lot since 2018, 2019, the early days of the Ethereums of the world. We've now got things like Sui and Aptos that are very fast comparatively, but there's still room to grow.
I was going to say that casino games, you touched on that. That's like spot on. The next generation of iGaming really needs to be on chain. And I think the trust factor is going to be a key component in moving to Web3. I think that's key to any player. Also on the regulation side, being able to validate and verify true RNG is going to be key.
I also believe the importance of on-chain random, especially like on the casino games and like a Gamblify centric or like skill-based Gamblify. But I also believe that we are like very early in the journey, because I was like just like looking at a survey of Stack Overflow, and they have mentioned that only like 25% of the developers feels that Web3 is the future. Rest 75% says it is a scam, it is a fad, it is like bunch of a hype. And the reason is we have to like still come up with a simplified infrastructure. We have to provide a better developer experience so that people can actually like start building on top of Web3 without worrying about Move, Solidity, Rust. They can actually create whatever they want to like create just by using the APIs or SDKs. The way we have been like integrating AWS, Google Cloud in a Web2 ecosystem, similar kind of experience we need to like bring, and for the like end users as well, so that we can actually like unlock the true potential of Web3. But yeah, as I said, that we have come a long way. And as Aptos and Sui is doing like a really amazing, and we are also like almost like there, because previously it was like very hard. Like on every transaction, you were like paying $25 or $50 gas fees. Okay, we are like way ahead right now. There's one game, a tap to earn. They just allow people to just like tap and like earn from the game itself, and which is live on Aptos. I also created that game, and the best part is I just paid 0.5 APT and I did 10,000 transactions, so I'm good. We are on the like right path.
I think touching on that, also the onboarding process is something that's still being figured out. I think to take the average gamer probably doesn't want to go and set up a wallet and note down a seed phrase and deposit some fiat somewhere to convert into crypto, to transfer into another crypto, to find out the game they want to play actually needs a different token. And I think some of that stuff, again, not to hammer on the yay Sui and Aptos, but I think the ZK login stuff is very cool from Sui. I know there's other solutions coming out there in a similar space, but the reality is that for a lot of gamers, they expect free to play now. And I suppose a lot of gaming companies are going to have to expect to pay the gas fees on behalf of their users if they want to get any adoption.
It has to be a seamless onboarding experience, period. Whether that's Web 2 or Web 3, that always is key in order to get players into the game, versus them going someplace else, which will have that simplified onboarding. So.
Yeah, I completely agree with the other panelists. I think the great thing is that since I got into crypto a little on the later side, but since crypto gaming in 2021, I think there's been a lot of technological improvements that are making things easier, like the ability to be on an app chain to do things like Patrick said, like sponsor gas fees and stuff like that to make the user experience easier. Things like VRF, allowing games to have more on-chain interactions and do things like what Sherri's team's doing and have provably fair outcomes that are legitimate. Things like embedded wallets, I think, are very powerful at making the user experience easier, where people aren't firing off MetaMask transactions to do everything they need to in a game. I agree on-ramping still has a way to go, but there are awesome on-ramping services where especially people in the United States, for example, can whip out a credit card and very easily get something into the game. But I do think we are still very much in the infancy, and tech has cycles and gaming also has cycles. So I think there's a lot of innovation ahead in terms of tokenomics and game structures and things like that. What I try to talk with our team about is that we should look at how we can take gaming and the blockchain and create new possibilities, meaning that you can do this, but just taking proven Web2 game concepts and slapping a token on them, there's a lot more opportunity if we can just discover, explore, tap into possibilities that only the blockchain can deliver. And through that, we can create game experiences that aren't possible in Web2. And I think those types of games are going to be the ones that really break out for the industry, because gamers won't be able to just find an easy alternative somewhere else. And I think a great example, one of the coolest economic games of all times is EVE Online. And their team is currently building a Web3 game with a ton of on-chain elements. And I think that thinking of a game like that with all of the economic structured, living, decentralized on-chain is super powerful. And that could eventually get to a position where you can't take that game and move it to Web2 because of the integrations that it has with Web3. It only can be done here. I think when we start having more games that's where the industry can really take off into the mainstream.
All really great points. Leads into the next question there is, what does the path for this mass adoption, some of you guys alluded to some of the developer tooling and features, but for both the end user or the Web3 developer side, what does that path to mass adoption look like?
I can actually take that. We have been trying to figure this out since a very long time at LYNK, and it all started almost 2 years ago. When we created our first Web3 game, we realized, okay, it takes 2 weeks to create a game and it takes 2 months to integrate MetaMask inside a game. So that was a pain. Right now, the biggest challenge is how we can actually provide the best developers experience and also provide the best user experience. As Patrick mentioned, that zero knowledge proof is also one of the case, zero knowledge login is also one of the case. The same way we are using keyless to allow people to log in via Google, converting their Google account into a crypto wallet. And the best part is you can integrate this within 2 minutes. Talking about the Supra VRF, so the best part is now we have also created the tools which allows which allows anyone to integrate Supra VRF within 2 minutes inside any game. Now we have to come up with these kind of simplified infrastructure which reduce the time of integration so that people can actually focus on product itself. I had a talk with a lot of projects, and initially they want to build everything by themselves. That okay, we want to write our smart contract, we want to integrate everything by our own, and then they realize, okay, but we were creating a game, right? So a lot of distractions are happening, and we need to remove these distractions, and we cannot make that particular thing possible until or unless the simplified infrastructure available. And as also Nick mentioned about the on-ramp off-ramp, the challenge with on-ramp off-ramp is a lot of people wants to do the transactions via debit card or credit card, but the moment they see KYC is one of the challenge that okay, I do not want to do that. The moment they see NFT mint, I do not want to do that. We have to build a product like a product. We do not have to differentiate a Web2 product and a Web3 product, because a lot of the mass users, they are not aware about this terminology, and with time they can actually be able to grasp that, but not now. They do not want to verify themselves to just do a transactions because they haven't done that while doing a transactions in Web2. We have to change the whole narrative. We have to think a little bit different. For example, instead of doing on-ramp off-ramp, we can actually use the existing payment gateway, and we can actually sync the payment gateway with on-chain transaction with the smart contract. So it's more like the way you are done with the transactions. You just airdrop the token to the users, which is much easier because it also do not violates the policy of multiple platforms. You are doing a transactions in a Web2 manner, and you're just using Web3 as one transparent layer, one sort of a decentralized layer. So we are using the Web3 more another better version of the whole protocols or whole the projects. So I think a little change of the narrative, and especially in terms of the terminology, we have to work a lot. We do not have to sell ourselves as a Web3 project. We just have to tell that, okay, we are a project which is empowering decentralizations.
Yeah, I think to add to that the features have to outweigh the negatives, or the negatives have to be less negative. If there's no reason to use Web3, people are not going to use Web3. I think there are a lot of cool features that kind of exist in Web2 land, skin markets, for example, or like points, leaderboards, things like actually translate well to Web3, but until they're like better there, and there's enough motion such that everybody moves there. Like creators, for example, Steam rips the ass out of poor creators and game developers in terms of fees. And obviously, it could be cheaper if all those things were on chain, but until there's a critical mass of people making the move over, I think it's not quite going to hit the mainstream. But I guess, like a lot of things, slow, fast, and then all at once.
Yeah, I think it's going to be part of the marketing team's initiatives to really drive the value proposition, the trust, and the transparency that brings to the table. Being a veteran in this space, in the iGaming space for quite a long time, the same story is repeated over and over. It's about trust and about being cheated and feeling as if the game is not legit. And so that's one of the things that LuckyBit Casinos was working on, is making sure that we have that transparency and really can utilize the value of on-chain data for the user.
I guess there's a social element to that too, though, because I think you can do all the technical fancy cryptography stuff in the world, but if the end user is going to go and read it, they're going to read in a forum somewhere that LuckyBit Casino are scammers.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that's part of the challenge that we face, is how do you create the interface that makes that easy for the end user versus having to go follow the chain. And that's something that we're working on in order to really validate the data. And you can't do that in a way that is too techy and that you lose people, especially when you're losing people with just the term Web3. So we have to really work with marketing, work with the team on making that an easy process for the end user.
So there is a question actually, and I actually had a similar question in mind. So just jumping in. So actually, you mentioned, I think a couple of you already mentioned the casino games like poker or something, right? So the quality of randomness or the properties of randomness that are delivered on-chain that differ quite a bit, right? And Luis Brandao asked this question, it's very along the same line, that in terms of readiness of applications, do you envision a significant difference between apps whose randomness, one, can be public immediately when sampled, two, needs to be initially private but can later be published and verified, three, must remain private forever? So we do have some research on this at Supra, and whether we need to make the randomness private for a while or maybe like private for a longer time or something. I think Pratik from our team is going to talk about one of our new work on this. So just throwing this question onto the panel. What's your thoughts about the quality or the proper features of the different kind of randomnesses you need? Just to start, that the standard randomness beacon or any kind of VRF service that delivers randomness on chain would definitely not work for games like poker, right?
Yeah. Because people would be able to reverse engineer the VRF and know what your opponent has.
That has to be a case-by-case basis, right? You can't just throw it all into one bucket and say that all use cases will work the same. So, for example, poker being one that's a different use case than, say, the pull of a slot handle and the outcome of that particular results.
Most definitely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Because, for example, with Midnight Heist, in order for us to prevent people from doing that, when people like submit their hand, everything, their lineup, everything is like hash and hidden on chain. And then everybody has to then reveal at the same time. And then the tournament goes. And there's some clunkiness around that. And we talked about how like the messaging to the users is very important, because one of the most common questions we get is people are like, why do I have to come back and click the reveal button? And we're explaining that no one, including us, knows what you have. If you don't come back and click the reveal button, you're going to get disqualified after a period of time. But a lot of users, they maybe don't care, but I also think users don't care until they do care, meaning that they don't care about the consequences until the consequences actually happen. I was a big online poker player back in the day, and I remember a lot of scandals around, for example, I think it was Full Tilt. They had someone essentially playing with God mode, and all of the players had to accumulate tens of thousands of hands to prove statistically that there's no way this person was, even if they were the best poker player in the world, they couldn't have won as much as they won. And so that's a perfect example of like people not caring until they care because they could have been personally impacted.
And you can tell them all day long how fair it is until you have the proof to show them that it's fair. They won't believe you. And they may not even believe you once you provide the proof. That's can't help them on that one.
I think
So
on
verify.
And
Sorry,
this-
just one point, like
Yes,
just
go
a
ahead.
follow up, like the verifiability feature, like on chain, like that's what you're doing, like verifiable randomness, right? So does it help here? I think you were mentioning that we have to be like Web3 game applications they have to be different from Web2 applications. Like this God mode kind of thing is by definition, or by, let's say, like provable method, we can prove that it's not possible. So what's your thoughts?
I think all the scenarios that Luis has come up with here, we've got the technology, we've got the research, it exists, but like this is complicated stuff. And I think for dApp developers, going down the rabbit hole and even knowing some of the solutions to these things are available is difficult, right? There's so much research happening. I think in the Web3 space, there's such a proliferation of research in so many different directions that nobody can possibly know every rabbit hole, and it moves fast. And for your average dApp developer, being an expert in cryptography might not be top of the list of things that you want to spend your time on. For example, Nick, you mentioned this commit reveal thing. Time lock encryption exists, but do you know about it? Is it available and usable on the chain that you're working on? There's so many boxes that have to be ticked for it to be easy to integrate, and yeah, that's a pain. Same for zero knowledge stuff. Is it? And then the cost element is another factor. Is it expensive? Does it take a lot of time? Et cetera, et cetera.
100%. And then once again, it's like if a tree falls in the woods and no one's there to hear it, did it, meaning that getting the players to play is more important than maybe how the VR, if it's fully revealed or not. If you have no players, it doesn't matter. But then as you have more players, and I think as these things progress over time, it becomes more important. I was a big NFT trader in 2021. And the typical process for NFTs was you would buy the NFTs, they'd be unrevealed for a period of time, and then they would reveal, and you would sometimes get a rare one that was worth a lot of money, or you'd get a common one that was worth the floor. But at the time in 2021, there was issues where people were like, was this really random? Or did you like stuff the ultra rares to you and your friends' wallets and stuff like that? But it only mattered once the project had already had a certain level of success, right? If it didn't mint out, if no one cared about it, it wouldn't have really mattered. But once I think you hit that impact, then people really do start to ask questions and care about those kind of things. And now, for example, a lot of NFT projects use things like VRF or some sort of other on-chain verifiable way to prove, hey, I didn't give me and my 10 buddies the 1 out of 1s and then are done. Because there was real scandals in 2021 around that. But as other people on the panel have said, these things are very important, but you have to unlock like the user growth and excitement first. And then the building things the proper way is how you can maintain your reputation and build that trust over time once you've achieved some sort of basic level of success or momentum.
I think that when you're talking about someone's winnings, the money that they're playing in a real money game, that is just exponential to that fact, right? I want to trust that if I put money in, that I'm not going to be cheated out of it because you've gamed the system, that your RNG is hackable or it's not trustworthy. And that plays into the regulators for the regulated real money gaming industry. That is a very large issue that they're facing.
Yeah, another good example is Counter-Strike. There used to be a lot of skin raffles and skin gambling, and it was tough to verify. How do you know that the people who put on these raffles weren't just using like some rigged backend server to deliver the random numbers needed?
And the sad part is a lot probably were.
Yeah.
Probably. Unfortunately.
Yeah, so to move on to our next question here, a lot of you guys are using randomness or VRF in some way. We'll love to hear your use cases, and then we can move on to what are some of the pain points you guys are experiencing, and perhaps what you guys would like to see as new solutions.
It's pretty obvious for the games that we're building. They all require randomness, except for our skill-based games, but that's a whole nother subject. But
Yeah, I think so. How we use it, particularly in our game with Midnight Heist, is when you join a tournament, you're going to get a randomized draw of cards, and with that, you're going to build the best team that you possibly can. So that draw itself is randomized. You also have the ability to like re-roll operators or weapons that you don't want and get a new one. All of those re-rolls are also VRF randomized as well. So it's baked into the foundation of how the game works. So it's super important to me, or important to us. But like Patrick was saying some interesting things when he was talking about like time locked encryption, I think is how you worded it. But there's definitely some things I think with like VRF where you could get more, it could allow you to build more interesting things potentially without creating these awkward like step 1, step 2, step 3 kind of processes. And I also know that there's ways to do it from just a game mechanical standpoint. One of the fully on-chain games that I really like, it's called Sky Strife, and it's like an RTS. But if you think about like an RTS on chain, like how do you make it so it's not clunky? And essentially what they would do is like queue up a bunch of actions, and then every 15 seconds, all of the actions would spit out at the same time for both players. And eventually as the game progresses, it gets like the pacing really good. They didn't have any VRF though, but I think that like looking ahead with building types of games, like for example, could you have like encryption transactions that are queued up for players and they come out at like a certain period of time? I also know that you guys are working on something where it's like a output feed instead of an input request, right? And I think that those things could potentially open up some interesting doors.
I think from people using DRAM randomness, we get a lot of requests from game developers for more random numbers faster. That seems to be like the number one demand, is that maybe in a block I actually need 10 random values or 100 or 1,000 random values, which possible, but obviously requires a little bit more fiddling. I think the biggest pain point is this kind of asynchronous nature of doing stuff on the blockchain, that if I want the random number in my smart contract now, I can't get it now. I've got to wait to some future block to get it fulfilled. That plays to what Nick mentioned earlier about users having to come back to reveal their move. I think this kind of multi-phase commit, you might say, is definitely a huge pain point.
Another thing I was just thinking about off the cuff, and just preface, I'm not a dev, so sometimes when I say these things, I may butcher them in really bad ways. But for example, with like Midnight Heist, when we need a random number, we get a randomized string, right? And then we have to convert that into the output that we are looking for. So like just simple rolling a dice, we need D1 through 12. So we need a randomized number 1 through 12, right? Like a more streamlined thing could potentially being able to ask Supra, we need a random number 1 through 12. And on your end, you're pulling a randomized string that's on chain and then applying something that converts that into a 1 through 12 roll. And we just get the exact output that we are looking for. And that kind of process, I think, with games and stuff like that could make it streamlined and more accessible and also more secure, right? Because if there's 2 steps in the randomization, it's only as secure as the second randomization step, right? Like you guys could give us a truly random number, and the algorithm that we're using to convert it into a D1 through 12 roll could have some sort of issue or potential exploit or something like that. And being able to get the exact output random number that we need, that could be an interesting thing as well for game developers.
I think cryptography is full of surprises. Turning one knob here affects something over here that you never expected. And random numbers are, full of unexpected dragons.
agreed.
I think like so what we are doing with Supra is we have been like working on the loot boxes or completely no code loot boxes, and our like major goal was how we can actually simplify the end developers experience. And for that, like we have created multiple SDKs, including Unity and Unreal SDKs as well. and we try to like make it completely no code. So you can actually just add multiple collections. You can actually add the number of items which you can actually add, and you can also put the range. Apart from that, we have also added the support of the APT, like for example, the in-game token or like the cryptocurrency, if you want to do the giveaways. And the biggest challenge is when game developers come with a lot of customizations. That is like one of the case, because say, okay, I want this to be like 50. I want like this item, for example, hat. I'm gonna give away like 15 hats. I'm gonna give away like 10 cats or something like that. Now that's like one of the like most challenging part. So we have to figure that out. We have written the whole contract in that way so that people can actually customize in the maximum extent. But still, sometimes we have to sit with the developers and we have to tell them, okay, we have to like see everything, especially like for specific studios. That is like one of the issue. But in terms of the scalability factor, I still see that Supra has one of the like most scalable VRF solutions at the moment, because it is like very fast. It supports like multiple number of collections in one loot boxes, which developers like the most, and a lot of them are just like using it. So yeah,
Yeah, speed is extremely important.
yeah, exactly. Because let's say if I'm like hitting the claim button and okay, I have to like wait another like 2-3 minutes to like get it done. And the major challenge is the array list. For example, if you are playing with 10 gamers, that's fine. But if 10 million gamers like playing, the array is like getting huge. And at some point of time, it will not gonna work. The chain will gonna go down. That happened when we were like not using Supra. So what we have to do is we have to pick some random people from our side. But then we just with the Supra, we realize that like a lot of people with like big chunks of gamers, let's say like 10 million monthly active users, they are also like able to pick that things real quick. So that speed and the scalability part is like very much important, like when you are like hitting the on-chain randoms, because at one point of time, it is like becoming so complex to handle all the array list.
From my end, a lot of the feedback we get from dApps and developers is usually just around also just lowering latency, and of course doing so in a way that doesn't compromise the properties why you would want a VRF, like the unpredictability and the provable verifiability. So we actually have 2 questions in the chat here. I'll just
before
read
we
it out
go,
loud. Yeah, go ahead.
sorry, I just want to ask one question about. I just want to mention that, like when you mentioned, Vishal mentioned about this, like producing a bunch of random values together. That's course quite a lot of like our research was involved in that. And actually, tomorrow there is a talk that will explain on that, elaborate by Pratik Sarkar. It's called Instarant. So we try to make things like which are instantly available and verifiable. So just a comment to mention. Yeah, go ahead, Ray.
Yep. Yeah. So there's just 2 questions in the chat here. I'm just going to read it out loud for the recording. Are there any interesting applications where numbers are sampled from specific distributions like Gaussian instead of a random or uniform distribution? And number 2, are there existing protocols that perform such sampling from specific distributions?
Above my pay grade. Smarter guys on this panel and gals could probably answer that.
I think you can take a random uniform distribution and turn it into a Gaussian one. I guess for stuff like loot drops, for example, the common skins, every time I roll for a Counter-Strike skin, I get the bloody auto shotgun every time. But the Gucci knife or whatever is going to be some end of the Gaussian distribution. And one day I'll get it, but
I had a bunch of loot boxes from 2017, 2018, and everyone was like, just don't open them, sell them. That's the plus EV move. And I opened them all, and yeah, it was not good rolls.
I'm sure there are other applications that will come to mind immediately.
So Gauss that's essentially putting it on like a bell curve kind of shape where there's
Yeah,
Maybe not Gaussian, but weighted is kind of interesting for something like, for example, you might want to, if you in a far future world where auditing was done through verifiable randomness, you might want to weight an audit based on the size of the company. Probably doesn't make sense that the random one-person shop that makes a very small amount of money has the same chance of getting audited as the multi-bazillion megacorp.
Anybody else have anything to chime in here, even from the audience? Might have some good insights.
Sure. Yeah, I was waiting for the. So then one question I wanted to ask, because you're building all these in game definitions, did you come across a security situation where randomness was in a question? And how did you handle it, or how did you prove that this was done correctly? Something interesting to share that you've come across in your journey so far in this space?
I've faced this multiple times, and it's comes from regulators, it comes from the consumers, and it comes down to you in the regulators side of things. You have to open full kimono, you have to share everything, and you're at their mercy. So you better have your act together. And when it comes to the consumers, you have to be careful about how much you share to protect your algorithms, and you do the best you can there. And this is why moving to Web3 is important for us. And so that we're not constantly having to go about these approaches in the way that we've done in the past. And so that's a long road, and it's changed over the decades on how it's approached. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, to some extent, I was looking for an interesting incident where you have to. My question was more focused on the on-chain part. Oh, you say that. Oh, somebody questioned that. Oh, I don't trust that. I should have known this, and you say that no, actually, this is now the randomly generated. Here's the proof, and there is no way we are doing anything incorrect here. Did you have to face some situations like that? Or?
Yeah, in poker, that was constantly a question, right? And you do audits against your system and post those audits for your players, and you constantly having to walk them through it. And it's a pain, but you do your your audits and try to help the end user feel that the game is as legit as possible. There's a lot that goes into poker with collusion, and you have to have systems in place for collusion. But when people don't win, they always feel, and especially in poker, they don't ever think that it has to do with their playing. It has to do with somebody else is cheating or the system is rigged. It's not about the fact that you're just a bad poker player. Go ahead.
Yeah. No, I just wanted to ask, by auditing, you mean that you ask like some opening up the random decks in the end and match if they're speaking correctly or something?
So our audits in the past have been both from regulatory audits that they require that you audit and verify at different interim checkpoints with regulators. That's required. But on an audit from a game perspective, where we go internally and do the audits to, verify that we haven't been compromised, that no data has been leaked. And so that's important in determining the data that you do share with end users if you need to, or regulators that you need to. And so that's, I think, really key in making sure that you're aware of what's happening also. I would say that anytime someone comes to you, and even though they might be a bad poker player, right, and state their claim, you should take it seriously, because they are your customer. And without those customers, you wouldn't have a business. And that's where in a business, regular audits, anytime you have an RNG as part of your product, you should always do regular audits. It's the
right
thing to do.
There is, there is a regular audit, but what I was thinking that you run this distributed kind of game, and then in the end, like if someone complains, like the game is over now, so you can ask everyone to open up all their cards. So let's say if you responded correctly, that could be another process of audit. In cryptography, it's called like reveal the randomness, but then you can map the entire, you can track back, and if somebody was actually cheating, and then everyone actually, it's publicly verifiable that anyone is convinced that the entire game was run correctly. So this kind of audit can also be possible. That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
DRAND works with universal basic income, not for profit, and that pays out universal basic income to people in Sierra Leone. But obviously, they don't have enough money to pay everybody in Sierra Leone, so they use DRAND as a sort of lottery process in order to select some subgroup of people to receive this income. We were asked there to provide some transparency tooling to make it possible that people can see, if I was included in the draw and whether or not I was drawn from the list. But it's actually quite hard to balance this public and private element of things, because obviously we don't want to release the names of everybody who's on the list,
Right.
and even the names of people who have won the lottery for fear of somebody who didn't win coming and taking their stuff or whatever. So that's been quite challenging to balance those principles in a way it's verifiable enough if you've got the right info, and looks nothing up my sleeve is a kind of cryptographic principle that you be as honest as possible, even though you can't always give away all the information.
Wow, that's I
Yeah.
was not aware of this actually. No, as just a
Yeah, and
follow up of that. Okay, sorry, go ahead. Yeah.
no, because my question, I'm very curious why don't you follow some deterministic order that everybody get paid? Like you paid 1 to 100 this month, 100 to 200, another one, so on. So I was very curious why they want it to be done using randomness.
Yeah, so in essence, donors donate 1% of their income to social income, and the idea is that each person who receives it for either 2 or 3 years, so they can measure the impact of this income on firstly the person and their family, but also their wider community. So if we were to take the entire pot and just pay everybody a fraction of that amount, impact's probably quite negligible. Giving $1 to everybody is not going to be the same as giving $1,000 to one person. So that's why they chose to do a lottery process.
On a
I
follow
understood.
up
I
of
guess
that,
it's just basically they do not have enough money to give everybody, so they just
Exactly.
few number.
yeah. No, I just wanted to ask. This is like very interesting use case, and I heard about it. People talking about it. I haven't really seen someone actually deploying. And you said you are continuing this procedure for like how long?
So we've been working with social income for I think just over a year. In that time,
it's
we've done I
interesting.
think 6 draws. The last one we did was on Saturday. Yeah.
And so can you one of the use case that comes into my mind, like can you use it for something like double blind randomized control trial kind of thing, where you choose a group of people to deliver randomness, and somehow you have to maintain the blindness? That I'm not sure how it works here, but it's just a random thought.
Could you expand on it for
No, I mean,
trials
there are a lot
generally
of
or for UBI?
So it can be like let's say unconditional cash transfer. Like there are these RCT experiments where you choose like within 100 people, you choose 50 people, you give them cash, and you like study their behavior for the next 2 years or something. Like are they doing better, or they end up in the same place or something? That all these social science and economics experiments, right? With randomized control trial onto socioeconomic spaces. And there you need to choose these people like out of 100, if you're economic 50 with exactly half probably. That's pretty crucial. But you have to be doing it in a blind way so that they do not know if they're chosen or not somehow. So those are like all this kind of setting. So I was wondering if you can somehow do this, but the blindness probably is hard to assure in general.
Because you've either got cash or you haven't. So it might be that obvious.
Yeah. But yeah, sure. Yeah.
So Patrick already touched on this, but would love to hear from the panel, what are some broader demand and use cases for blockchain randomness, either happening now or in the future? Could be government related, public goods related, regulatory wise, protocol layer randomness.
I'll just state that from a real money gaming sector, that both the land-based casinos and the online casinos that are in the regulated markets definitely need to move in this direction because of and some are, but from a regulatory standpoint, getting them on board as a requirement, I think is a next step. And that's going to be quite a challenge because the regulators move slow and they're stuck in their ways. And the industry is a legacy-based system. So anytime you're dealing with a legacy-based system, there's quite a bit of pushback on change. That's from my experience from that sector.
I say in the upcoming future could be like a trust layer for multiple protocols and applications. Why? Because as Sherri mentioned that real money game is like one of the use cases, and in India, like real money game is like one of the like biggest market, and a lot of people, they are like in the doubt that okay, whether I won or whether that I won is like a legit winner or not, as one of the case. Especially, I can also like super bullish about Gamblify. So the future of Gamblify like the Gamify is like just getting started. Like a lot of good Gamify projects are coming in. But I see like more skill-based Gamify are yet to explore. And there also like on-chain randomness makes more sense. For example, if you talk about the RWA, a lot of places where they do giveaways, like they do like lottery things. And that is also like one of the concern for other end users that, okay, are these lotteries are legit or not? Especially like those token one. When you like go to the shop, you just put the token, you just like place in the like box and they just shake the box. So I'm like looking for the futures that like these like on-chain randomness could become a trust layer for the world that, okay, now I can actually trust everything because things are like happening on-chain, getting picked completely and in like decentralized manners. The future of on-chain randomness is like huge. It's not just dependent on the gaming, but overall the end-to-end, like over like day-to-day use cases, I see there's like huge potential. But yeah, we are just getting started. Super bullish about that.
Yeah, I think use case wise, there's a lot of different use cases. Both in gaming, I think government has so many use cases, although that's a tough nut to crack. Although I think demand for randomness, the raw demand will definitely increase. Although I think at some point it's going to become commoditized in that blockchain ecosystems themselves are going to come up with ways for generating randomness. I think potentially the demand for third-party randomness services will probably reduce. I think some experience we've had in DRAM is that anything that comes from outside into a protocol adds latency and adds difficulty, complexity. There's always going to be some impedance mismatch between what service like DRAM provides and what a service like a specific blockchain wants in their randomness, be that the frequency or the format or exactly how it is laid out. And we've seen that a lot of newer chains like the Swedes and the Aptos have come up with their own built-in solutions, like at the consensus layer or at the protocol layer, to make randomness happen, which makes a lot of sense. And I think that trend will probably continue.
Nick, do you have anything to add to that?
No, I think those are all great thoughts. I think, at least from the gaming perspective, I think that what we have right now with VRF unlocks a lot of the potential use cases in gaming. I think it's just a matter of implementing them and going with them. Although I do think that what Patrick said from a blockchain perspective, having more of that stuff baked in is certainly interesting, especially if you're trying to make faster games with lower latency.
Yeah, with Supra, we're working on the push VRF right now, which we're planning to have randomness beaconed into block by block for upcoming Supra L1. So currently our data shows 500 millisecond optimistic block times, block finality. And this can solve a lot of pain points some of our dApps are asking for, just in terms of having frequent and low latency randomness. Yeah, so we're running close on time right now. We'd just love to give all the panelists an opportunity to give any final remarks.
Yeah, me personally, I like to govern a lot of my life with randomness. There was a study from Daniel Kahneman, RIP, many years ago that suggested that people prefer random selection over having a choice. If you have a choice between two things, you always regret which decision you made. But if you're randomly assigned one, your enjoyment of life is slightly better. I like to use DRAM on a regular basis to just make random life decisions.
Like what restaurant you want to go to?
Exactly. And I wouldn't want to leave it up to unverifiable randomness, lest the evil Google overlords influence my decision. So stay verifiable.
The beauty of it is you can always roll the dice again if you don't like the first choice, right? Random is truly random if you stick with the first random choice, right? But first, I want to thank Supra for holding this panel today. I appreciate that, and getting to meet these fine gentlemen and talk about things that I think are dear to our heart. That kind of geeks us out a little bit, but I've lived in the random world for all of my career, and it touches everything I do in work, whether that is in entertainment, which, believe it or not, has a substantial amount of randomness to it, like many stories on that, but definitely in the iGaming space and in the gaming world, definitely in the artificial intelligence side of what I do is key in that. And I look forward to working with Supra and seeing where we can take this.
Yeah, thanks again for putting this together. And we've already have a great relationship with you all, with our game being live for 3 or 4 months now. I haven't had a single problem. We've had problems, not a single problem from Super VRF. You guys have been uptime phenomenal, and speed great, to the point that our players don't really have to ask any questions about that. So I appreciate you putting on this panel, and it was an absolute pleasure to talk with everyone on here and hear from you all, and would love to connect in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for making this possible. And it was like really nice talking about the randomness thing. And we had like a great chat, a random chat. So I would say that in the next few months or the next few years, keep spinning up the wheel and let's see where we are going. But so far, super excited the way we are like moving, the way more good projects are like coming into the place, the way we are like unlocking scalability with Supra and other protocols. All of the people over here, you guys are like doing like really amazing job, and let's do it together and keep spinning up the wheels. Yeah, like thank you so much for that.
Yeah, let's give all the panelists a round of applause. Thank you so much for being here. Really great talking to you guys, and looking forward to continuing the conversation.
Any
Yeah,
questions,
great.
audience, before we go?
Yeah, any question? I see the Q&A box. Let's see. I do not see any open question. Anyone like to speak up? Any question? Okay, if not, I think we can thank the panelists again, and it's really great. We learned a lot. We work on the research side, on the development side, and it's really great to hear what are the challenges. And like Patrick mentioned once, we can all have like great cryptography, but it's really, then we have to get it to the end user, and there are like several layers of challenges remaining, which makes this space quite exciting. I hope to connect to a lot of people here in the future and to learn more. Definitely quite an experience. All right then. So with that, I think we end this session.